Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm talking about why is there so much Stage 2 hate in the Pokemon trading card game. This has definitely come around from two reveals that are going to come out in our 30 Spark sets in just a few weeks' time. But I want to kind of look into exactly what the history about the Stage 2 hate. So in today's video, we're actually looking at what actually makes a Pokemon, looking at basic Pokemon, Stage 1 and Stage 2, kind of give a little bit of an insight about how a format has definitely started to evolve around these style of archetypes. Let's also look at the history of the game. Kind of see, is Stage 2 hate kind of quite a new sort of thing, or has it kind of been going around in the background for Pokemon for multiple generations? Let's also look at those brand new cards in detail. Look exactly what is the threat of these cards to Stage 2 Pokemon. So let's also, where do we go from here? Can Stage 2 Pokemon generally survive in a format dominated by decks like Raging Bolt? So in the Pokemon trading card game, there is three different types of Pokemon. There is basic, stage 1 and stage 2. If we look at basic Pokemon, normally they're much more lower HP Pokemon. These ones to evolve into much stronger guys, or generally for support Pokemon. You can see here they have much lower HP. But there is another certain card. We call them big basics. These are Pokemon which have quite a lot of HP and can do a huge amount of damage output. We can see here it's changed quite a lot. If you look at Reshiram having 130 HP, back in the day, that was incredibly strong. Now look at the Raging Bolt has 240 HP. The attack all of a sudden for Reshiram with Outrage can nearly one-hit KO most of the format. Look at Raging Bolt 70 times, all of a sudden you need 2 energies in one-hit KO Reshiram. We're in a format which has changed completely back in the day, all the way from 2011, which is insane to think about. So when I talk about big basic Pokemon, normally these are EX Pokemon which have a lot of HP and can deal a ton of damage. The other one is the mid-stage, the stage 1 Pokemon. Normally these ones aren't as impactful. We have the likes of Curly, which is really strong for draw sort of factor, but for a time Pokemon didn't really have a good sort of stage 1 Pokemon. A lot of them were these big basic style decks, so we tried to have some evolving. Think of the likes of VMAXs. These are ones that obviously gave up multiple prize cards, heck even 3, so you only take 2 of these to get a big one-hit KO. But forcing you to actually wait a sort of turn to get these big one-hit KOs, we were in a format where that was absolutely okay. So you can have this sort of affording to effect to evolve into your Pokemon. Pokemon tried to reintroduce this one. They did that a little bit similar to the likes of V-Stars, but we all remember days of Lugia. But the likes of Palkia was a little bit more balanced as well. Pokemon which have really good sort of V Pokemon, but the V-Star was much stronger and introduced us to the V-Star power, away from it only used once per game, but it's incredibly powerful with abilities or attacks. Now obviously we talk about stage 2. When I mentioned about stage 2, I may talk about evolving style Pokemon. These are Pokemon which have very, very powerful abilities. Think about how strong the likes of Charizard Gardevoir is made around to the deck or just around to support Pokemon. Or sometimes really to try and keep up in the metagame right now, they have to have a lot of HP. Think about Charizard, it wouldn't be as strong if it didn't have over 300 HP to keep up with the very scary Raging Bolt of over 200 HP. So now, I'll look at the history of the game. Well, best place to start by looking at the World's Championships at 2010. This is a really good place to start, because evolving decks were so strong. Like some Gardevoir and Gengar were one of the strongest decks around in the format, where you could be very, very fun and aggressive, likes of Jumpluff and Gyarados, potentially attacking on your first turn of the game, which I absolutely loved. And there was some incredibly good support in the 2010 metagame for evolving decks, which returned a rare candy in this Heart Gold Soul Silver format, which was really, really strong. And that's one of the things which I absolutely love about this one. But also in the release of Platinum, introduced us to Broken Time Space, one of the most broken stadium cards ever printed. Each player may evolve that Pokemon that they put into play during that turn. So you can evolve them on your first turn of the game, or if you put something out in play. This was introduced in the Platinum set. As well as also in the Platinum set, introduced us to our first, what I'm going to call big basics, SP Pokemon. These were Pokemon which were already fully evolved, but they were all basic style Pokemon, which was a little bit of a threat and quite a bit of a surprise for back in the day. Now, I'm going to hear me out. 80 HP back then was a lot of HP, which obviously we look now and go with, why is my Fuecoco got 80 HP? I can't touch out Buddy Poppin. Garchomp CF 80 HP, that was quite a lot. Yes, obviously you could evolve into some likes of level X's if you're in the access spot, but I'm mainly looking at them as more of a basic style attacking option. And obviously they had these really huge attacks which do 50 damage, and against Garchomp, obviously we can see here, that one-hit KOs Garchomp, which is really insane to think about. Like 100 damage was a lot back then. But we're in a format where you could mainly sort of evolve and not really focus on the big basics. This was definitely a huge threat. And this was definitely seen into effect in the 2010 World Championships. We can see here there is a really good split of some evolving decks, but if we see the big basics sort of thing like Luxtrump, we see there's 4 of them in the top 8. Yes, some of them are very different sort of variants of the build, think about it. Likes of Dialga and likes of Blaziken. If you want to know a bit more about my World 2010 video, I actually did one last year, so go ahead and check that out. But this is generally the start of kind of like we're seeing the return of big basics be the main sort of focus point of the Pokemon trading card game. We're obviously talking about 2012. Again, it's a video which I did back in April last year and really covers the rise of Darkrai and Mewtwo. This is where we saw a huge change, and I think it's really good to see the difference between Reshiram and Mewtwo, as they were only really released pretty much a year apart. If we look at Reshiram, it's 130 HP, but Mewtwo has 170. 40 more HP to Reshiram, which is, again, really scary, and the attack's a bit similar. 20 damage plus 10 more for each damage counter on Reshiram, but this one does 20 times the amount of energies. We're in the format with likes of Shaman, which can move around your energies out and play. Darkrai, Dark Patch, we can flood your board with a ton of energies, but what made this really scary is it gave up 2 prize cards. We were a return of the 2 prize mechanic of the Pokemon trading card game, and this was devastating for evolving style decks. All of a sudden, you weren't really going to be focusing on evolving ones. You could have these big basics which would absolutely be dominating the metagame. We could see this in the World 2012 metagame. If you see here, there is a Darkrai Mewtwo just flooded everywhere. We can see here, all the way in 14th place, top 16, we see a Candy Gore, which is obviously using an evolving style deck, but you might go, oh, I'm attacking you with Excel Gore. Yes, this is a stage 1 Pokemon. You will be mistaken. You're attacking with Mew Prime, which puts, and you use your Relicanth to actually put your Excel Core in the lost zone so you can attack with it. You have to look all the way down to the 22nd place, top 32, to see a Magnet Zone Emboar deck actually focusing on a stage 2 Pokemon to be attacking option. So we can see here that these big basics have really completely pushed out these evolving style decks, which is really quite a bit of a scary sort of situation. And this really continued throughout the Pokemon trading card game for quite a few years. Likes of Darkrai, Team Plasmanex, and Yveltal were absolutely dominating the metagame. And this is generally where I'm seeing a big, huge rise of basic, big Pokemon. There were no longer these big, viable sort of stage 2 or stage 1 Pokemon. Yes, they kind of found their place as sort of a support Pokemon. Feeling like Garbodor really found its home in likes of Darkrai. There was also Yveltal, shutting down these really key abilities from the Plasma decks, or even likes of Blastoise as well. That was one of the reasons why it was so strong. We saw Blastoise as well. Obviously, it did win the 2015 World Championships, but it won because it wasn't a stage 2 Pokemon. It focused more on the Archie style sort of deck, making sure it's the only card, Archie's your only card in your hand. And then you get to put this Blastoise out pretty much on your first turn of the game, which is really scary. And they can attack with these big basic Pokemon like Black Kyurem or Keldeo. Or you can have some really good support Pokemon like Crobat as well. That's Surprise Bite. These Pokemon with like Landorus and Seismitoad, which don't do as much damage but are huge threats in metagame, you can use Crobat to do additional more damage. This is where they kind of like found their spot. Stage 2 and Stage 1 Pokemon really became more of support styles of decks. But we did see the rise of a certain archetype as well during this time, Night March. Joltik was an incredibly fun deck, and this is a deck which I absolutely love, and it's actually my brother's favorite archetype of all time. This was incredibly strong. People were scared of his 30 HP Electric Spider, because there's 20 times the amount of Night Marches you have in your discard pile. This could keep up with these huge, big basic soul Pokemon. You had this single price archetype getting these huge one-hit KOs on the likes of Yveltal, Seismitoad, these really scary decks, which generally was incredibly powerful. But obviously, 30 HP, it's really weak to the likes of the Landoruses. It's really weak to the likes of Crobats or anything which do damage to the bend, which is what made this one quite a big liability. Heck, even likes of Shaman as well. People found a way to kind of go around this single prize archetype. Stage 2 Pokemon did try and go around with life. Think of like Gastradon was a really fun deck I played from Breakpoint, but another good card from Breakpoint was Greninja. Effectively a stage 3 Pokemon when you got the breakout here. You can actually use evolving decks with really powerful. Greninja was one of the strongest archetypes right now, looking at evolving style decks, really focusing on to get this one out and play. You can cheat your evolutions by having the Frogadier out as well to just put it out there. Similar like of Shine Archon, the Raj Guard of Curliers. So again, really think about the way, trying to cheat their way out, not really utilizing the rare candy. But because we have so much good sort of love and support, Pokemon prints some really bad hate. Think about Seismitoad EX, one of the, I feel like one of the most hated cards of all time. Pretty much blocking out your opponent from any item cards. And we're in a very heavy item cards. And in a format where likes of tool cards were item cards. Think about the Floatstone, Muscle Band, the Fighting Fury Belt, all of them locked up, or likes of rare candy, Ultra Ball, Versus Seeker, really scary. Or generally, you can have the likes of Glaceon EX, which prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by evolving Pokemon, which is really scary. Imagine your Greninja, yes, you can only use your giant water shurikens, but you can't actually attack with this one. And in the format of Max Potion, it can instantly be healing it very easily with the likes of Aqua Patch as well as Max Potion, which is really scary in this format. That's generally one thing which is quite scary. But with all of this sort of things here, Pokemon released something which was one of the best things they ever did. The Sun and Moon era got a return a little bit of similar mechanics we saw before GXs. GXs made sure you actually go back to evolving. We weren't using these big basic Pokemon, and they had a monstrous 240 HP. Again, on a stage 2, this was a lot back in the day. Don't think about your Dragapults with 320. But they were evolving when you had to actually get out to these guys. Now, Decidueye was really strong because it had the likes of Forest Giant Plants and Vileplume, which was a huge threat. Ice blocking your opponent, but it's also bringing it out into play as early as your first turn of the game, which is really scary. But GXs introduced us something similar to like the V-Star powers, these GX attacks, which made sure you can only use them once per game. Now, this made them incredibly strong and found a way to actually kind of go away from these big basics. We're kind of like going away from the Evotoll, which pretty much was the dominant sort of archetype when Decidueye was out, actually kind of get taken out from the metagame. The only likes of Volcanic could really keep up. And we saw the return and all the way from Sun all the way to Lost Thunder. Really strong sort of decks like Gardevoir and Zororark. Obviously, Zororark, one of the strongest ever best cards ever printed. And Gardevoir as well, they were winning nearly back-to-back world, which is, again, really something good to see. Obviously, Pokemon tried to introduce more of the big basics like Buzzwole and Pheromosa and all of those sort of ones here. But because you had these evolving style decks like Gardevoir and Zororark and Gastradon, yes, some of them were stage 1, but they could really keep up in the metagame. You have Bridget as well, really good search card. There was in a format where evolving decks, you weren't punished. You weren't in a format where your opponent flipped over a basic Pokemon and you would instantly lose. But as like I said, when Pokemon prints something which we absolutely love, something a little bit devastating also got printed. Tag teams. These were the scariest GXs. Notice how I say 240 HP was a lot on a stage 2? Well, now match 240 HP on a basic Pokemon in exactly the same style format, which was incredibly scary because it was also a basic Pokemon. And it was a tag team because it was 2 Pokemon in 1. They gave up 3 prize cards. This was the first introduction to the style effect. Effectively, like I said, you can win in 2 turns by just carrying these big 2-hit KOs. The reason why I'm talking about Pikachu Zekrom, granted, not only was it the first one, but it has absolutely terrifying attacks. With the first one, Full Blitz, you can easily power up like the Tapu Koko Prism style, as well as also the Thunderous Mountain. Pretty much getting this one early on, also having the Electro Power to get these big 1-hit KOs, and your Tag Bolt, all of a sudden you can do additional more damage with your GX or style attacks. If you have additional more energy, which is absolutely terrifying. This is where this format got absolutely dominated. It was constantly overrun by tag teams. Now, luckily, tag teams are only legal over in 1 World Championships because of COVID, but we can see here they absolutely dominated. 6 of the top 8 placements were tag team Pokemon. Obviously, it ended up being won by Henry Brand with that Mew and Mewtwo tag team. But you can also see, there were some other evolving style decks here. You saw Naganado and Pidgeotto, but they were only used for support. Naganado to attach energies, Pidgeotto for draw, but effectively helping basic Pokemon. We were in a very heavy basic style of decks, and this constantly continued. If we look at, I would say, the 2019 to 2023, I'm not going to bore you in all this when everyone knows this is basically up to like the dark time for the Pokemon trading card game of ADPZ, which obviously introduced us to the mechanic of a boss game. Is the only way how you describe this, how monstrous and scary this archetype was. Obviously, the reign of Mew VMAX pretty much dominating the entire region of Europe, which obviously was very, very fun to see if you're playing against it, but also incredibly scary. They tried, like I said, they tried to reintroduce the evolving mechanic with these VMAXs and V-Stars to try and like introduce like effectively to try and like stall out a turn. But we're in a format by the time we got to these ones being the most dominating archetypes, you're not attacking turn 1, so this is absolutely fine. And let's not forget how powerful Lugia is, one of the most scariest archetypes in the format ever to be produced. But we were in a shining grace. Scarlet and Violet era reintroduces back to the EX mechanic. You could evolve into your Pokemon. They were stage 2, and Gardevoir was probably the best one to start off with one. Really focusing more on evolving decks. You would really want to have your Curlies out on play. You really wanted to have your other Shine Arcana Gardevoir to actually draw into your style decks. And we can see here that Gardevoir did incredibly well. One of its first regionals, basically, the European International Challenge, it got 2nd place, which is incredibly powerful. And it really kind of solidified that stage 2 Pokemon were really here to play and actually keep up with the rest of the metagame. And this continued to evolve around the rest of the Scarlet and Violet era. We see like the Baxcalibur. Obviously, we know Shenpao Baxcalibur. Yes, you are using a basic Pokemon to actually attack, but your whole focus is about evolving style decks. Bibarel for draw factor, and obviously Baxcalibur to flood your board of energies. And as we know on this channel, Shenpao Baxcalibur is the best deck ever printed. And of course, another argument for one of the best decks ever printed is Charizard and Pidgeot, introduced in exactly the same set in Obsidian Flames. Charizard, having a monstrous 330 HP, an absolute behemoth of attacking option, had an incredible ability and amazing type, which just gets stronger the more prize card the opponent has taken. And Pidgeot EX, it was a reprint of the regular Pidgeot from back in the Ruby and Sapphire era, but trying to search for any one card is incredibly strong. We could see this really keep up. We have seen this absolutely love for the stage 2 decks. We've seen them kind of like performing pretty well in the League Cups, and we've seen regionals as well, and generally lots of people talking about this one. We're in a format where we can actually say goodbye to these really scary V-Stars and VMAX Pokemon, but as like I said, Pokemon introduced us to the latest new mechanic. Paradox Pokemon. These were these ancient and future Pokemon from the Scarlet and Violet game, and oh boy were these terrifying. These were these behemoth basic Pokemon with 240 HP, which only gave up 2 prizes. Long are the days of Pikachu Zekrom with exactly the same HP, but gave up 3. And these were scary because they could get these big one-hit KOs and terrify Stage 2 evolving decks. Roaring Moon with Friendship Guarantee can instantly one-hit KO the opponent's active Pokemon. Raging Bolt can flood the board with lots of energies. Granted, it did take a few sets to actually get really strong with the likes of Ogerpon, but all of a sudden you could do like 330 HP on your first turn of the game going second, which is terrifying. Or Iron Hands, making sure your lovely basic Pokemon Charmanders, your Pidgeys, your Dusclops and Duskulls, all of a sudden they are now 2 prize liabilities on the bench. You don't have to worry about having your Rotom and Minion out and play. They get picked on by your Raging Bolt and Roaring Moon because they play a ton of Gusting effect. Iron Hands just goes, raids, and KOs all of those guys anyway. It makes them 2 prizes. This is what made it really scary. It brings back basic Pokemon to be in the forefront. And if we look at the format right now, we can see that all of these guys are up there as one of the strongest styles of decks right now. But I want to talk about these new threats from 13 Sparks, the card that really got me thinking about why is there so much hate printed for Stage 2 Pokemon. And that, of course, is Gastradon. Now, if we look at it on paper, this looks pretty terrifying. If this Pokemon is on the bench Stage 2 Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent have no abilities. Now, instantly, when I first read this, I thought, oh, if it's in play, there's no Stage 2 Pokemon have abilities. But then I kind of went with, well, what Pokemon is always on my bench which I want to use this ability? There is a lot. All of them I've mentioned before. Batcalibur, Charizard, Pidgeot, Dusknoir, Gardevoir, all of them are pretty scary and like to be on the bench to actually utilize its abilities. Now there are ways around this one. If you think about like Dusknoir, you can obviously use it as Curse Blast in the active spot, you can use it to KO Gastrodon, and then you're not worried about it in a way, and kind of like go around your daily basis, or generally just chain your Dusknoir in the active spot. Or like some Pidgeot, Charizard, check the Pidgeot in the active spot, as free retreat, use its abilities, and then when you have to retreat into Charizard, just evolve your Charmander or Charmeleon, and then activate its ability. You have ways to kind of go around your Gastrodon, but decks that don't really have as much of a stronger liability against this one, are like some Gardevoir and Baxcalibur. The reason why I say this is because, yes, you can use the ability in the active spot, but you're always going to be a couple energies short. Gardevoir, you want to make sure you have exactly the amount of energies in your discard pile before you're attacking with your likes of your Screamtails or your Drifloon, which is pretty scary, or Baxcalibur. Effectively, you have to make sure one of your energy attachments after your Baxcalibur is on the bench or something like that, because it can be very, very scary being down a couple of energies, especially if you're Shen Pao. So that's one of the big scary things of Gastrodon. If we see some results in the City League watch, carefully looking at the couple sort of the first weekend, we see obviously did really well in some of the in the Milotic style decks, and we're going to see if it's actually made an impact in the Heavenly Kings tournament this weekend. So definitely something which I'm really excited about to look into. But the other card which I'm really scared about is Rotom. This is really scary in like most of control archetypes, but generally on its own. What's really scary about it is your opponent reveals their hand and discard any item cards or tool cards you find there. Not only does it give us some hand knowledge, but it removes some really key sort of cards for Stage 2 Pokemon. You're removing likes of Rare Candy, Forest of Stone, Ultra Ball, Super Rod, Buddy Buddy Puffin. Incredibly good cards to actually make sure your evolving decks can actually keep started. Say you use a Rotom V on the bench, you draw into some additional cards at the end of your turn, your opponent just hits this and you hit your Rare Candy, Forest of Stone off that card, they just instantly discard it, which is really scary. Not only does Rotom be really powerful on its own style deck, it can be chucked to Control, it can be chucked to Miraidon, or generally just in any sort of deck, which is really, really scary. Why is it scary about removing like Super Rod? If you're a Charizard, you have to discard to your Fire Energies early on, which is quite scary. You prize one, all of a sudden your opponent discards maybe 1 or 2 Super Rods from this Rotom. You only have like 2 energies to deal with a Charizard. And that can be really, really scary. You have to constantly have this really good hand management for this one. Getting rid of some of the good search cards, getting rid of some good abilities to try and get some of your cards is really scary for Stage 2 decks. Is this really a doom and gloom to oppose? Are these going to have any impact? Not really, potentially, but it's definitely a threat to kind of like go forward. It's kind of like, where do we go with Stage 2 sort of style decks? Now, if we look at current results, we can see here that it's a good sort of plethora. I'm looking at the Stellar Crown sort of format. Obviously, I know that Gardevoir did win in the Shroud of Fables format. But we see here that obviously Dragapult won with the likes of Dusknoir, so it had a back-to-back sort of final appearance. And we know Dragapult is in a pretty good sort of spot right now. When we look at V-Star decks, we see likes of Lugia and Regidrago kind of like going around there. These sort of pseudo stage 1 sort of style Pokemon. Yes, I know they can, like, Regidrago can actually attack on his first turn of the game, but Lugia can't, and it really needs to have their V-Star to actually really keep rolling. Or if we look at the big basics, Regidrago's won twice if we include the Champions League happening over in Japan, and Trapper Goat as well. Trapagos obviously utilize some stage 2 Pokemon like Pidgeot and Dusknoir as mainly more of a support Pokemon. So kind of looking at this one here, we can see evolving decks are trying to keep it up there, but evolving decks which are much stronger right now are generally there as support sort of packets here. Like so Pidgeot and Dusknoir, I can see them much more stronger as these support ones. We can see obviously how powerful Dusknoir is in just the likes of the Palkia style deck. Yes or no, Palkia, technically you can cast it as a mainly Greninja deck, so you do have like the Greninja EX as an evolving style deck, but Dusknoir is a huge threat to evolving style Pokemon. If you go first of turn and you get the first pop of your Dusknoirs and Dusclops, you can effectively remove loads of your opponent's liabilities. You can remove the mana fees to unlock your Greninjas. You can remove your opponent's first of Duskulls so they can't actually get into the game. You can remove their Pidgeots, the Charmanders, the Dreepies. It's really scary Dusknoir, they're just a support Pokemon. Pidgeot as well is one of the best support Pokemon we have in the game. It's a quick search, check for any sort of cards as well. We've seen how powerful it is in likes of Charizard and even likes of Trapagos. Heck, even I tried it in likes of Shenpao, which was pretty powerful and did get me a couple of points at a few league challenges. So it's generally another way to see it as more of a support Pokemon. Yes, I know Dusknoir is an evolving deck, but it is an evolving deck which destroys other evolving archetypes. Or generally, does anything actually change? Are the evolving decks just so strong enough that the hate from Gastradon, the hate from Rotom, heck, even the hate from the Paldean and Tauros as well. Is this actually a way to actually slow down these style of decks? And if we just look at Limitless, we can actually see evolving decks are in trouble. We see Charizard, if we look at this amount of points people have accrued in the Day 2 Regional, Charizard is the third most popular, Dragapult is the seventh one, and Gardevoir all the way down there at 12th. We can look at obviously some big evolving decks which actually evolve on kind of like stage 1, like V-Stars. We can see here that Palkia, Resurgence, and Lugia are doing pretty well, but evolving also one like stage 1, like Goldingo is doing pretty well in Burnett. But we can see here if we look at the sort of the top sort of placements, only one evolving deck is really in there. We look at the top 10%, even if we go decks with 10% or higher, we can see here that yes, Trapagos has some evolving Pokemon, but they're mainly there for support. So generally, I think we're in a format where there is a ton of hate for stage 2 Pokemon. If you think about how powerful basic Pokemon are, how scared you really can be when you flip over a Dreepy, when your opponent flips over a Raging Bolt, how scary they can just ramp up the damage and just effectively win the prize trade. If they're one prize ahead, all of a sudden when you try and get popular Duskulls and Dusknoirs, you might not be able to actually get the warranted effect you really want to have. So that's generally something which I'm really been thinking about in the metagame right now. Looking ahead, generally feel like this could be a threat. But generally, looking ahead, is this the doom and gloom for stage 2 Pokemon? These 3 Pokemon here, I think, really accurate represent some huge threats to stage 2 Pokemon. The Palkia to unlock the likes of Greninja play, both from the EX as well as the Radiant, is really scary for any Charmanders, Pidgeys, Duskulls, heck, even the opponents' Froakies as well, which is really scary for this one. Can stage 2 Pokemon really keep up? Think of the likes of Charizard doesn't really unlock its full potential with big one-hit KOs until your opponent's taken a couple prize cards. So that's generally something which I think is a bit more of a concern to have. And is it generally enough to still have fun in the Pokemon game with your evolving decks? Or are we in a format where we have to be constantly playing big basic style decks to actually try and keep up in the metagame, to try and have fun, to try and get points, try and get the World's Invite, and not really rely on these fun stage 2 decks? So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Kind of got a little bit of a history lesson to see exactly why there's so much hate printed for stage 2 Pokemon. It's not always it's always been a thing. I think looking at 2010 is a really good representation. Seeing about the SP Pokemon all the way to now is so interesting how much they've been looking at power creep in the last 14 years, but generally also to see how there's always been that threat against stage 2 Pokemon, even though Pokemon is constantly built around evolving decks. So, hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Comment down below, do you think this is the doom and gloom for stage 2 Pokemon? Or are we in a format where stage 2 Pokemon can absolutely still survive against these big basic Pokemon? So, I'll be back for a couple of days time for another video, breaking down the, hopefully the Heavenly King's 8th huge tournament battle, kind of seeing what their best decks are in the Surging Sparks of metagame. I wonder if it's going to be any Pikachus, as you know, Pokemon is printing a lot of big basic sort of support, or can we see the likes of Dusknoir kind of be that threat to evolving decks? So, hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you do, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye for now.